sometimes you just get a figure that reminds you why you like this so much. It just gives you a little reminder of what it's like to just love a Transformer. From Transformers Legacy Evolution, this is Armada Universe Starscream, and aside from being one of the most unique Starscreams ever, almost more like a Dinobot than a Starscream actually, it's also just one of the best versions of Starscream, possibly my personal favorite. It's really interesting to see a character defined by ambition, greed, and selfishness be redefined as someone who essentially is fighting their abusive dad for respect. And it's a different take than we've ever had from Starscream, that we probably will ever have again from Starscream, and it makes him one of my favorite characters in Transformers, period. Just a forewarning now, I'm going to be gushing a lot, kind of like Hotshot last week, so be prepared for that. Take a closer look, and just like I said with Hotshot, this is an era of Transformers design I really miss, making the characters big, bulky, very human-like in terms of the proportions, as well as just the spectacular head sculpts that were always maybe a bit too big for the bodies, but still gave so much character. Looking at the figure as a whole, right? So we do have a head, like a ball joint here at the head, but unfortunately side to side is really restrained, but you do get great up and down. And then you have the shoulder cannons that can fold forward, just like if he used his Minicon partner, which unfortunately he does not come with Swindle. I do want to point this out too, the backpack can be folded down, but I mean, for the iconic silhouette you need them back up. So I'm not personally going to fold them down. I wish there was a way to just fold the missile launchers down, that would have been fun, but no, you have to fold them forward for the gimmick, I guess. And then, of course, you do have a hinge here on the wings as well to fold those down. That's for when you're using the sword. You have a universal at the shoulder, a great rotation there at the upper arm, double jointed elbows on a Transformer, and a hinge at the wrist, which is great for sword poses. If you unhook the cockpit, you have a waist joint, which works very well, and then the cockpit you can just plug right back in. Universal at the hip, very deep knee, and even a little bit of pivot at the ankle. This is one of the most articulated mainline Transformers I've ever seen, just in terms of sheer points of articulation, but also what you're able to do with those points. In terms of accessories, Starscream does of course come with his iconic sword. Now typically in the show it would light up red, but they weren't able to work that in, and quite frankly I would prefer a gray sword to a red sword just because that's more what I think of from the toy. Now, in the original toy, as well as the anime, the sword is made from Starscream's wing, and that led to a very disjointed looking wing. So instead of doing that, you can use those hinge wings to fold that down, the wing is still right there, and you still get the visual cue, as if it's formed out of the wing. And I honestly think that's the best way to do a modern Armada Starscream. Making it out of the actual wing would just make everything look really thin, I think. Moreover, I think that this is better than what they did with the Thrilling 30 Armada Starscream, because that was a red sword, and even though that looked more like the anime, it also just looked like it was an accessory, whereas this, if you turn your brain off, you could honestly be convinced maybe that that's supposed to be the wing. Alongside that, you do get a second sword, the Starsaber, and I didn't even realize this. When you look closely, you can see the Minicons. So if you're unaware of the show or the canon, the Starsaber is one of the major weapon MacGuffins that they fight over constantly. It's one of the major plot points who controls the Starsaber alongside the Skyboom shield and the Requiem blaster. And as for the Darksaber, I believe it's made by the Sky Patrol Minicon team. It's been a long time since I've seen any of the fiction. But you can see where the separate Minicons are in this. You can see that these are just separate jets that have combined together, and that's really well done. They could have just made this a glorified lightsaber, but they went the extra mile to put all the detail in it to make it more genuine Armada. When Starscream holds the sword, it looks fine, but I think when you compare it to his other sword, It does look a little dinky just because it's a little bit thinner and a little bit shorter, and Starscream is a fairly well-sized Voyager, but that's because the sword's not for him, it's for his buddy here. So if you never watched the show, the Star Saber coming with Starscream might actually seem a little weird, because in the anime, Starscream never wielded the Star Saber for any prolonged period of time. The Decepticon who used it the most was Megatron. However, Starscream did have an ongoing rivalry with Hotshot, and they had multiple sword fights where Hotshot used the Star Saber, because Hotshot was the main Autobot to use the Star Saber. So I think that was a very intentional and really brilliant way to pack in that accessory, knowing that they would be coming out around the same time period, but also there's already a pre-existing relationship between these two, from hated rivals to having begrudging respect for one another as swordsmen and as warriors. So once again, it's just another thing I love about the figure. The transformation is really straightforward. It's a lot more fun to actually do the transformation process than Hotshot, but unlike Hotshot, no guess for figuring out which robot limb went where. This is just an unfortunate part of Armada Starscream's design, where the robot definitely came first, which, granted, it absolutely should. The robot does take precedence, but yeah, the vehicle mode kind of just had to make use of what it had, leading to like the single most un-aerodynamic transformer I've ever seen. It's just a nose cone on a brick. But, I don't know. On one hand, completely accurate to the toy, completely accurate to the anime, and for me, it's what I wanted, because I want a recreation that still harkens back to even the goofier design elements. However, you could just as easily make the argument that this is supposed to be a better version, so you could have streamlined the jet mode. I don't know if there's a correct answer, it's just a matter of opinion. And in my opinion, yeah, you probably could have done more with the arms, at the very least. Like, the legs you can kind of hide, but just, look, that's just the arm. But of course, a big feature here is you can still push the missile launchers forward, leading to an even more confusing aerodynamicism. That said, it looks cool enough. We're operating on rule of cool here. I adored the Hotshot, and I love this Starscream even more. I know Optimus and Megatron are on the way, and quite frankly, I hope we get at least more of the original cast. Like, I would love to have Red Alert, Demolisher, Cyclone, basically just the remainder of the original 7 Transformers from the show. Even though I would love characters like Blur, Sideways, maybe even Jetfire and Scavenger, I think they're too late in the line to really expect. I mean, I think if we look at the Beast Wars model, I think Hasbro wants to complete Season 1 teams, and even that might take a while. Like, if you look at the Kingdom Beast Wars guys, right, we literally just got Inferno, and that finished up our Season 1 team. And then we might get, like, upgraded versions of main characters. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we got Super Link, Starscream, maybe called Thundercracker, but the blue version of this mold. Same thing with a more Rodimus-inspired Hotshot. But I don't think we're going to be getting a character like, say, Sideswipe. You know, I hope I'm wrong, because I would love the entire cast of Armada. But it might honestly be a stretch to even say we're getting the original 7. Like, I don't see a world where Cyclonus exists, which just makes me all the happier that we got Starscream like this. Granted, for him and Hotshot both, I would love to see maybe a 2-pack that has Jolt and Swindle, but even if we don't get that, just having these two is spectacular. They're 2 of my favorite Transformers in years, and I can't wait to see how the Armada collection might grow from here.